Hello, Tigers. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pull the lecture up. We're going to talk about D.B. Cooper, and I'm not monitoring, so hopefully this sounds okay. But anyway, I'm sure it's fine. I'm doing exactly the same thing I did last time, but I just am kind of nervous about not monitoring. But anyway. Let's talk about D.B. Cooper. Actually, let's talk about the final project. We're going to do that first. You'll recall that there are two different ways that you can approach the terminal project in this class. One of those is to find a book or documentary length, work of journalism and investigate it looking for bullshit. The other is to pick one of the books that claims to answer the burning question that we all want to know: what happened to D.B. Cooper? Where did he go? What did he do? Did he die? Did he not die? To make a good decision, you're going to want to know a little bit more about the D.B. Cooper story and the books that offer to debunk it. So we'll start off with that today. And I might... I can't... Well, yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be diving deep into this thing. It's a legend that grew up around an event that has established a firm grip on popular culture in the Pacific Northwest and around the country, really. It is the only unsolved hijacking in United States history. Skyjacking. Sorry, you can hijack anything. You can, hijack someone's car. But today we're going to talk about what happened, what we know for sure. There are two ways that you can approach the final project, like I said. That project is to be a 5 to 8 page paper in which you examine something that you suspect may contain bullshit. That may be something that you find, or it may be one of these books. Whichever you choose, your decision is due. I think I made it due on Monday of next week. Well, check Canvas for sure. It might be later, but I think I set it for Monday. Anyway, whatever it says on Canvas is right. Don't listen to me. Listen to Canvas. So, if you're going with the Cooper story, you may want to find and read this book in addition to the one that you're going to bust. This is Jeff Gray's book, Skyjack. It is a pretty good introduction to the story as it developed after the skyjacking, splintering off into about 3 different accounts of, who the guy was, how he did it, who he was as far as we actually know. This book is well done and journalistically sourced and is close to a true, unbiased, what we actually know kind of thing as we're likely to find. Let's talk about the event now. It starts in PDX on the day before Thanksgiving, 1971. You'll notice that I got 1 out of 2 of those things right in this picture. That's PDX all right, but that sure isn't Thanksgiving 1971. I did manage to get the old carpet in it, though. Anyway, 71... PDX, day before Thanksgiving, and a bland and slender-looking man in a business suit, several years out of style, strolls up to the ticket counter at Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland and buys a single ticket to Seattle. He pays for it with a $20 bill. Can you imagine it cost $20 to fly to Seattle? Yep, it did. Anyway, or less than $20, really. They probably give him some change. Well, he gives his name. It's Dan Cooper, he says. Probably a reference to this series of French comic books about a test pilot. They're not actually French. It's French. They're French comics about a French-Canadian pilot. But you better believe you can pick them up in French Canada. These are all like little bits and pieces that various investigators have linked in as part of the clue. So the Dan Cooper comics are definitely, one of the things that gets brought up. Okay. At the ticket counter, Dan Cooper says, "That's a 727, isn't it?" Yes, he's told that is right. It is a 727. In point of fact, it is this 727. This is what it looked like on the tarmac at Reno after landing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. He climbs on board and heads for the smoking section. It's at the very back of the plane, the very last row of seats, with his back against the bulkhead by the bathrooms. And that is going to be, and I'm going to have to break the fourth wall and get around here and point right here. This spot right there, right to the right of that arrow. A row of 3 seats. He's in one of them, and there's nobody in the other 2. The smoking section. That was the smoking section back there. Back then, the smoking section was like from here on back was at the very back of the airplane. That way people in the front of the airplane, just kidding, they could totally smell your cigarette smoke. Everything was cigarette smoky in 1971. I was 3 years old or 2 years old or some shit. So I don't remember it real well, but trust me, it was. Well, he settled into his seat, Mr. Dan Cooper does, and he fires up a Raleigh filter cigarette and orders a drink. This is an ad for the Raleighs. They were a going brand of cigarette, and you got coupons with them that you could use to redeem for cool stuff like, I don't know, an iron lung or some anyway. So he orders his drink. It's bourbon and 7. He pays for it with another $20 bill. Everybody buckles up. The plane takes off, starts climbing steadily. The stewardess comes back out to take drink orders, and as soon as they do that, Cooper flags one down. He's already got his drink. He doesn't need another drink. What he needs is to hand this stewardess an envelope. Her name is Florence Schaffner, and this is what she looks like. Now, this happens a lot to stewardesses in 1971. They get envelopes handed to them by random single men flying on the airplanes, especially when they look like that, which they all do. In 1971, airlines are actually competing using the sex appeal of their stewardesses. You get stuff like this. Actually, I have a friend who was a stewardess on TWA in around this time, actually, and she said they had to weigh in every week. The boss man would make them get on a scale and make sure that they hadn't gained any weight. Theoretically, because they were part of the load of the airplane. But if you go up 4 pounds, and they're like, you got to take 4 pounds off of there. It wasn't about the loading weight of the airplane. It was about making sure that the stewardesses looked hot so that they could appeal to the, traveling business guys. Yeah, so they get these notes all the time. Usually they're love notes, or maybe they might be straight up propositions. Hey baby, I'm lonely and looks like you are too, or whatever. I know there's a country song. I'm trying to remember the lyrics to it. That's something like this. But anyway, but Florence, of course, is completely uninterested. By the way, the advertising people, they're not helping the stewardesses at all. This is an actual, real, live, bona fide advertisement for National Airlines. There was a whole series of these. Anyway. So Florence doesn't know, doesn't care, could not be less interested. She drops the note in her purse, moves on. He calls after her. He says, Miss, I think you better have a look at that note. She looks, and it says, I have a bomb here, and I want you to sit by me. Yes. Okay, so she sits down, and he shows her the bomb, which does not look like this, but it's the best I could find. That, by the way, you can totally tell those are taper candles. Anyway, it's in his briefcase. There's 5 or 6 red things that are either dynamite or road flares. There's a bunch of wires, and there's a battery. He tells her that it will go off if he touches a wire to the battery. They're at 1,000 feet and climbing. She is not about to call his bluff. So the man has the stewardess take dictation with his demands. And these are, he wants $200,000 in, quote, unmarked American currency. He uses that particular phrase. In a knapsack. He wants 4 parachutes. That's 2 back chutes and 2 chest chutes. He wants a fuel truck on the ground at Seattle. And he wants food for the flight crew because it's going to be a long night for them. In fact, he has a little bottle of White Crosses, a little Benzedrine's truck driver pills, which he offers to let the crew have so that they can, stay up. Anyway, he's a courteous bandit. He's offering to share his meth. Anyway, Florence takes the note up to the captain's cabin. And while she's doing this, the other stewardess, whose name is Tina Mucklow, picks up the plane's intercom. They call it the interphone. It looks like this. It's like a telephone with a button on it that you push to talk. And she alerts the cabin that the plane is being hijacked. Now, the hijacker is starting to look more and more nervous. He gets out a pair of sunglasses and puts them on. And upon arrival in the cockpit, Florence hands over the notes, and she describes the man as mid-40s, brown eyes, short black hair, olive complexion. The captain asks her to sit in the jump seat with the headphones on and take notes. of everything that happens. Right? The plane doesn't have a recording system except for the black box, which is on a 30-minute loop. And if the plane blows up, the captain wants there to be some record of what happened, right? Okay, back in his seat. The hijacker is getting visibly nervous. He's watching for Florence to return. Tina, the other stewardess, starts worrying that he will panic and destroy us all. So she walks over and sits down next to him. And he asks her to get on the interphone. He uses the actual term, somewhat to her surprise, since most passengers don't know what it's called. They'll say the phone or the intercom and relay the messages for him. The captain assures the hijacker via Tina that the demands will all be met, and then he turns on the fasten seatbelt sign to discourage passengers from milling around. And a few minutes later, the senior stewardess tries to rescue Tina, who's kind of stuck in the seat with this guy. And also there's other people wanting drinks and whatnot. And she asks her to go fetch a pack of playing cards, and the hijacker interrupts and says, "Never mind about the playing cards. Go back to your station." Again, he's talking like somebody who knows how a passenger airline works. This is a short flight. It's only going to be an hour. They're going to be ready to land in Seattle long before the parachutes and money are ready. And the hijacker orders the captain to fly a holding pattern until all is in readiness. He does not want the plane landing until everything is ready to go. It's a lot easier to keep track on the FBI in the air than it is on the ground, right? If the FBI is going to be in the air, they're going to be in an airplane, and they'll be able to see it. Anyway, the flight crew is starting to worry about the risk of someone deciding to be a hero and getting them all killed. Not necessarily with the assistance of Halle Berry, but still. They're actually particularly worried about the burly college guy sitting across the aisle from the hijacker, shooting occasional hostile glances at him. This college man, on the other side of the smoking section, right? He's been getting more and more annoyed because the cute blonde stewardess, whom he would like to get to know better, is just sitting there next to this old, poorly dressed nobody and not, taking drink orders and visiting and whatnot. And the hijacker has noticed his hostility. Well, the captain tries to help by getting on the speakers and telling everyone that the plane is experiencing a minor mechanical problem and will be circling to burn off some excess fuel as a precautionary measure. Sounds reassuring, doesn't it? Yeah, we're gonna give the fire crews time to spray some foam on the ground just in case. It's a precaution. Right. He also invites everybody to move forward in the airplane into first class if possible. Most people do. Not sure whether they get their drink on. I mean, you get free drinks in first class, and I'm not sure whether that comes with the deal or if it's just the comfy chairs, but most people move forward. The college man stays right where he is. The plane circles for some time while the airline people scramble to get the parachutes and money. On the day before Thanksgiving, remember? And then the hijacker is more and more agitated as time passes, and finally, 2 hours into a half-hour flight, the plane lands. And the hijacker has a few final demands. He wants the fuel truck, vehicle with his money, and the air stairs. That's these. The air stairs at the 10 o'clock position so that he can see them. Now, notice again, Tina's noticing this again. He's calling the air stairs by the industry standard term, not the truck with a staircase on it or the stairs or whatever, the air stairs. So the hijacker sends Tina out to get the money, which she drags back like a sack of laundry, right? 20 pounds of $20 bills. It's not in a knapsack, and that causes the hijacker to get a little annoyed, but he says the passengers can get off the airplane. He'll deal. They were, of course, hustled to a debriefing room and counted, and there were 35 of them, and everyone was there except for one. You guessed it. Dan Cooper. Meanwhile, back on the airplane, Cooper initially says all the stewardesses can leave, but then at the last minute he changes his mind and tells Tina to stick around. He says, "I might need a little help with the staircase." The other two reluctantly leave. Cooper tries to give them each a packet of cash, but they just turn and walk away, which is unfortunate because they might have gotten fingerprints off of them if they had taken the money. Anyway, a refueling drama ensues. Cooper was pretty happy at first when Tina brought him all the stuff that he had demanded. $200,000 in 1971. I mean, $200,000, how many airplane rides would that take at $20 each, right? But now things are getting a little sour. One of the chutes, he can't help but notice, has a giant X on it, as in, don't jump out of an airplane with this on. The main backpack parachutes have no D-rings for the front auxiliary chutes to clip to, so the front chutes are useless, and the money is in a giant bank bag, not a knapsack. And now, it seems to him, the authorities are stalling for time by pretending to have trouble fueling the plane. The first fuel truck, we developed a vapor lock. We're going to have to move and going to bring another truck in. And then this one comes in and it develops a frozen nozzle. And Cooper, when he hears about the frozen nozzle, he explodes with rage. He threatens to blow up the plane and shouts that a frozen nozzle is ludicrous in a relatively warm place like Seattle, which of course it is, and that they were stalling, which, by the way, is exactly what they were doing. It shouldn't take more than 20 minutes to refuel a 727. And Cooper obviously knows it, and he opens up the briefcase and like he's about to blow up the plane, but then a third fuel truck approaches and he simmers down, which is kind of funny because this third fuel truck actually experiences a real problem. The first two, they were stalling. The third one, they're like, oh, this guy knows what's going on. We better bring this in. And it gets all screwy. So they have to bring a fourth one in, but luckily he wasn't looking. The crew of the 727 is getting pretty angry, too, because they're pretty sure the frozen nozzle story is bogus, and they suspect that someone safely on the ground is playing games, and they're wishing that he or she would stop before they all get killed. Just a few weeks before this, the FBI tried getting heavy with a hijacker, and they refused to provide fuel, and then they shot out the airliner's tires, which if you run an airliner trying to take off and the tires are flat, you can't. He was stuck on the ground. And so, of course, as desperados do, he decided to go out in a blaze of glory, basically murder the pilot and co-pilot and shot himself in the nut. This nut. So, yeah, that didn't go well. Was the Bureau trying to do the same thing again? No. Cooper's tantrum had its intended effect, and soon everything was ready, and Cooper had the parachutes, and he was inspecting them like a pro, like he's done this before. He pulls out the Packers cards, checks them out. He has to pick one of the parachutes for himself. And the reason he picked more than one asked for more than one parachute is because he wanted everybody to think that he was going to be taking somebody with him, like a hostage. Of the two parachutes, the two back chutes that they'd provided, the main chutes, one of them was a light sporty chute of the type that recreational parachuters like, a square steerable airfoil. The other one was this burly Navy chute, conical chute they call it. They looked like this, round, unsteerable, and equipped with narrow straps that would hurt when the chute deployed, but more burly, more solid. Cooper ignores the recreational chute completely and starts getting the Navy chute ready to use. And these are not easy to use. If you don't know what you're doing, you won't be able to use one. Next thing he does is demands that the plane take off with the flaps and landing gear down and the aft staircase lowered. And he wants it to fly no higher than 10,000 feet, and he wants it to go to Mexico City. When asked how many degrees the flaps should be lowered, he replies immediately he wants 15 degrees. What he's asking them to do is to fly the plane low and dirty so that it would be moving slowly enough to bail out of. And also because he's planning on opening the airplane up to bail out of it, he wants to make sure that they're not going to take the sucker up to 30,000 feet, where, of course, he wouldn't be able to breathe. The pilot and crew didn't know this, but 727s had been used in exactly this way in Vietnam to perform covert airdrops of goods and people. Was Cooper involved in that operation? This is one of the airliners that they used to do it, a retired United Airlines rig. Maybe. He seemed to know a lot about how to do it. Roll down the aft staircase and, drop the stuff off of it. Well, they take off again and head south. The plan now is to go to Reno, refuel, and then head to Mexico City. This is the Google Maps route for driving to Mexico City via Reno. Obviously, Google Maps won't give you an airplane route, but it's the general idea in any case. Where everybody seems to have figured out by now, though, that somewhere along the way this man is going to bail out. Right? He's busily and professionally strapping on the parachute, which is a very complicated process, and one has to be trained to do it properly, as I said. He's tying the money to his waist in a bundle, and finally he sends Tina to the cockpit, tells her to close the curtain and turn out the light. A few minutes later, he calls up to the cockpit to tell the pilots to slow down because he's having trouble getting the aft stairs open. They do. At 8:13, the flight crew feels a bump. There he goes, somebody says, and Tina calls back on the interphone. Hey, you okay back there? No response. Just to be on the safe side, the 727 finishes its flight to Reno, and when they get there, the pilot gets on the PA and says, look, we're making our approach to Reno now. We can land with that rear stairway down, but it may damage the stairway. We may not be able to take off again. Do you need help getting the stairway up again? No reply. So the airliner lands in a shower of sparks and a crash of rending metal before hundreds of wide-eyed onlookers who had heard about the situation on the news. Yes, this was back when the journalism world actually reported on stuff that was happening instead of deferring to the desires of officials who would rather not have anybody know what's happening. Cooper, it seems, had stepped off the back staircase of the airliner at 8:13 p.m. somewhere over southwest Washington. He had, in the words of Portland historian Doug Kent Crispin, who did a podcast episode on this, deplaned like a fucking boss. Okay, before Cooper had even stepped off the plane, the manhunt had begun. And so had the legend, come to think of it. The story of the skyjacking was crystallized into this romantic tale of one man against the man, Robin Hood-type folk legend that still angers some of the people that were involved, especially the ones who thought they might die by Cooper's hand that night. The legend persists to this day. These are some t-shirts that some folks had made almost immediately after this happened, and if you had one of these t-shirts today, you could probably sell it on eBay for north of $150. Cooper bailed out somewhere over southwest Washington, possibly as far south as the Columbia River. No sign of him, the money, or the parachute was ever found, despite an extensive search all over the area, until years later when some of the money was found on a sandbar in the Columbia River. By now, the consensus is pretty much either that he somehow got away or was unable to deploy the parachute, came down to the Columbia River, drowned, and was washed out to sea. And that's the basics of the story. From here, we'll be exploring some of the people who over the years have claimed to know or be D.B. Cooper. You will select one of these pretenders, read the applicable book for your final project, and produce a report analyzing the claims. And the reason we're discussing this subject right now, several weeks before the end of the term, is to give you time to select and obtain the book you'll be using to do your final project on, if you choose that route, right? So what really happened? There hasn't exactly been a shortage of ideas and theories and stories and claims about what happened to D.B. Cooper. You've probably gathered that. But Jeff Gray in his book only talks about some of the more prominent theorists. If you read Jeff Gray's book, he'll tell you about them. There are tons more. And for your final project in this class, you're going to pick one of the several books that propose what you might call D.B. Cooper origin stories. I'm really quite partial to the Hamburglar one myself. You'll read the story and apply the full force and power of your newfound bullshit detection skills on it. The idea is not so much to decide if the story is true or not. That's probably not possible this late in the game, but to decide whether it holds together as a legitimate possibility or if internal inconsistencies within the narrative and a preponderance of red flags suggest that it's not. Because let's be real here, we're not going to solve a 40-year-old hijacking in this class. Or maybe we are, but probably not. Anyway, let's talk about some of the possibilities here. Book number 1. Ha 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 by D.B. Cooper. This is one of the earlier books to have come out claiming to tell the story of what really happened to D.B. Cooper and is unfortunately anonymous. It describes Cooper, its writer, as a hard-drinking former businessman who decides to become a crook and embarks on a wild crime spree, pulling heists and having, James Bond-style sex with bodacious women and eventually getting sentenced to prison for a crime he didn't commit, which is a technical injustice because he committed lots of actual prisonable crimes, but he was sentenced for one that he didn't do, so he avenges that injustice by escaping from the police custody, and hijacking the airplane and disappearing into the forests of Canada with, 8 gallons of $20 bills. It is a fun read, this story is. Rumor has it was written by a woman, but its tone sounds so macho masculine that I doubt it. There is a woman's name associated with it, but I think she probably functioned as a publisher for whoever actually wrote it. Although, I don't know. It's certainly possible. D.B. Cooper, Death by Natural Causes by Pat and Ron Foreman. This book is self-published by a kindly couple in Washington State who make the case that D.B. Cooper was, in fact, their now dead friend, Barbara. You see, Barbara at birth was a gentleman named Bobby Dayton, and in the late 1960s had one of the first ever gender reassignment surgeries. So while the authorities scrounged over southwest Washington looking for some dude in a suit, Barbara, having ditched her boy duds and wriggled into a skirt and pumps, moseyed on by with the money in an extra large purse or something. And that, as the authors oh so funnily but rather predictably put it, is why the FBI never got its man. Yes, this is by far the craziest D.B. Cooper origin story I know, but it is actually a relatively robust theory. Fair warning, though, the book is not well written. It will be difficult to get through because it's just not well written. These guys aren't writers. They're just, random citizens. Number 3, D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened by Max Gunther. Now, Max Gunther was a staff writer for True magazine, one of the famous stag magazines of the 1960s that were more or less rendered obsolete by Playboy when it came out. Classic stag mags were pulps for men, full of swaggering, hard-punching fiction about pirates and adventurers and stuff like that, with hard-fisted Indiana Jones type battling their way through hordes of bad guys to rescue busty damsels and torn blouses. Here's a great example of a copy of True Adventures. Some of them actually came with softcore porn inside, usually topless women. Now, Gunther claims that he was contacted by the hijacker in 1972. The hijacker was a big fan of True magazine and of his stories that he wrote in it about, Indiana Jones types rescuing mostly topless women. And after winning the confidence of the hijacker and his girlfriend over a period of many years, Gunther claims to have finally learned the truth, that D.B. Cooper was really a guy named Paul LeClaire who dropped dead of a heart attack in the late 70s. So there's that one. Number 4, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy. 2 years after D.B. Cooper's caper, an ex-Green Beret named Richard McCoy pulled a heist that was very similar to Cooper's, except this one was over Utah and involved more money. Also, McCoy got caught. While McCoy was in prison afterwards, a Utah State prison official named Bernie Rhodes started getting curious about some of the parallels between the two cases, which in his opinion went beyond just the relationship of a copycat hijacker to a successful puller offer, and started to, tread upon the territory of maybe they were the same guy. Rhodes, after he retired, started examining the evidence thoroughly and seriously and came to the conclusion that McCoy wasn't a copycat hijacker. This was the same guy who, having gotten away with it once, thought he'd try again. Can this be so? Well, you'll have to read the book and decide for yourself. This book is probably, it's one of the more credible accounts. Written by a former law enforcement official, after all. Most of the others are penned by pulp fiction writers and random citizens, and, I guess one of them is a prison guard, and I guess that is... And then there's one that was a former FBI agent. So never mind that, but it is a pretty credible, solid theory. Into the Blast by Skip Porteous and Robert Blevins. This book puts forward the theory that D.B. Cooper was a Northwest Orient Airlines purser named Kenny Christensen. The idea is that he took advantage of his inside knowledge of airline systems and methods to pull off the perfect crime, the perfect skyjacking. Now, the evidence that they've pulled together in favor of their theory is largely circumstantial, but it makes a pretty compelling case. This book also lacks the arrogance of some of the others. The authors actually say that they are 70% sure that their theory is the right one, not 100% like the others, most of the others. And it is an easy read. They keep updating it, though, so this is like the 3rd or 4th edition. And I read the 1st edition, so I'm not entirely sure what they might have changed or tweaked. It's an ebook, and if you'd put off getting your book until the last minute, you will probably end up reviewing this one because it's the only one that's available as an ebook. Plus, it's cheap; it's like $2.99. So, and short and fun to read, and there's certain things about it that are kind of fun to make fun of. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, this one, I wish this was a better written book, but it's really long and turgid. But D.B. Cooper case exposed. J. Edgar Hoover cover-up? With a question mark, because that protects us from libel. George C. Nuttall is the author's name. I almost left this one off the list. Unless you're particularly interested in conspiracy theories and old school Sicilian mafia legends, you probably will want to steer clear of it. It's very long, it's not very well written, but in the book, the Cliff Notes version here, Mr. Nuttall makes the case that D.B. Cooper was a would-be player who owed big money to the Sicilian mafia and hijacked the plane in a desperate attempt to get it. And Nuttall claims that the FBI botched the investigation on purpose because J. Edgar Hoover was being blackmailed by mobsters, specifically Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky, which, if you know your mob history, yeah. Anyway, maybe. Anyway, yeah. So this is the other one. Now this is one of the most solid books, and also really pretty boring. Not that it's poorly written. It's not. It's well written, but. Well, this is by the former FBI agent, Richard Tosaw, and Tosaw makes the case that Cooper died in the jump, that his unsteerable parachute took him straight into the Columbia River in the middle of the night, and out to sea he went, was eaten by Nemo and Dory, and, that was it. Interestingly enough, the author backed this theory up with a $10,000 reward for anyone who could disprove it. But then, who can prove or disprove anything about this case? That's why it's still active. Well, it's not active. The FBI gave up on it, but it's still unsolved almost 50 years later. A good scrounge through the internet will turn up several other likely-looking attempts to claim a solution to the D.B. Cooper mystery. There's a slim self-published volume by Mr. John Frederick James Jr. claiming to deliver the end of the legend. Some random guy named Larry. Anyway, there's a horrific thing called DB in the Sky, which may be great, but is so poorly edited that it is literally unreadable. There are a couple of winkingly fictional ones, and you will find lots more. Please don't pick one of these unless you talk to me first, because I have to check it and make sure that it's suitable for this project. Once you've decided which one you want to examine, you'll have a couple weeks to get a hold of a copy, either by buying one or finding one at a library or reading it. If you wait till the last minute, you will be more or less forced to use the Porteous Blevins book, because it's available instantly for $2.99 as a Kindle ebook. So now, that basically brings us to a triumphal conclusion of the D.B. Cooper thing. So I'm going to sign off now. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you not very bright and early, actually. But it'll be brighter and earlier because daylight savings time and all of that wonderfulness. I know it's saving time. I always call it savings time because I'm a rebel. Okay, enough of that. See you guys soon. Thanks.